We are in Revelation chapter 20, and we're in the last couple of verses, so I don't want to review too long. You wonder why I review. Honestly, sometimes you forget what I said. I know that's hard to believe, but sometimes you forget. And then sometimes there's new people, and I always hate to start in the middle of something and they're completely lost. So I look out and say, okay, I'll pretend I'm reviewing for everybody else, but there's somebody here I don't know. Now, in Larry and Patty's case back there, we grew up in the same church together, so I know they've heard about the lake of fire before. So I don't have to. It's pretty much what his dad told him every time he was beating his bottom. You know, this, you're gonna burn, kid. So straighten up. You know, Larry, am I wrong about any of that? I know we grew up together. I know all about that. So anyway, I am jesting. Although I would say you probably got a couple of spankings in your lifetime. Did you not, Larry? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I was a pastor's kid. He was a deacon's kid. His dad was the chairman of the board of our church. And I've always said, if you want to corrupt a pastor's kid, let him play with the deacon's kids. It's never the pastor's kid's fault. It's always those evil deacon kids. Always. Always. I was toasty pure until Larry entered my life, and then after that, it was just all downhill from there. So, amen. Praise Jesus. No, we had a great time in high school together. It's always fun when you're good friends in high school, and then 40 years later, God brings you back around to be together again. That's always a lot of fun in your life. Okay. Revelation chapter 12 or 20 rather, and verse 11, he sees a great white throne and the heaven and earth flee away. I talked about Luo last week and becoming unhinged, unloosed, the destruction of the universe, 2 trillion plus galaxies with hundreds of billions of stars in each galaxy. When God removes, God walks away from every electron and neutron and proton and every cell. I don't know if you saw this week, it was on the internet. It's a 3D image of the inner workings of one cell. Did anybody see that? I retweeted it. It's not Twitter anymore, it's X, but I re-X'd it. I don't know, does that sound? I re-X'd it, and I just said, my God made that. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to Google it. It is a 3D model of what a cell looks like. And it is an engineering marvel. Matt, I see you nodding. Did you see that? Yep. I mean, everybody that goes to a service academy is an engineer. So plus whatever else you majored in. My son had like 24 hours of engineering classes, and he was a Portuguese major, so now he can go to Brazil and build something, I guess. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, it's the design of it is not likely a God of time plus chance. And everybody in our universities worship the God of time plus chance. And there's an X feed that I follow, and it's created by design or design. Caleb, I sent you a couple things. I forget but anyway, the author did 14 impossibilities of development. In other words, all 14 of these have to happen at the same time for life to exist. And if one of them isn't there, life doesn't exist, right? In other words, your heart's pumping blood and you're breathing oxygen. Which one develops first? They have to accidentally happen at the same time. Well, they're going to be in evolution. They might be millions of years apart. One in the Atlantic Ocean, one on the Pacific. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So when we saw God removes himself, he stops holding matter together. And all we have to do is look at the bomb over Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the Bikini Atoll in the 50s, and those are splitting atoms. They're the destruction of the atom. What holds the atom in place is Jesus Christ. By him and through him, all things consist. Colossians tell him. God just walks away from holding matter together. Ron, go ahead.
Einstein missed. I read, I don't know, it was over 15 minutes ago, so I don't remember what it was. But that's the one thing he got right. He understood that every rock, every twig, every tree, every piece of matter, if it comes apart, it has the potential of disintegrating with great heat.
Mm-hmm. And Peter tells us, why aren't you holy? For the world will melt with a fervent heat. Yep. Okay. So everything departs, face, earth, fled away. There was found no place for them. And he said, I saw the dead, small and great. We talked about that. The ground at the foot of the great white throne judgment. Vladimir Putin, if he doesn't accept Jesus, will be there, as well as the poorest person in Zimbabwe. It doesn't matter your status, how smart you are, the 80 IQ person and the 180 IQ person will all stand equally at this place. The ground, I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God. The books were open, another book was open, which is the book of life. We talked about that. There's different views on that. I said in my notes, we are not sure what all the books that are being opened, but the book of life certainly has in it the record of all believers. We do not see any place for work after death or purging away as in purgatory or spirit prison if you're a Mormon. This is a judgment to confirm destiny. The book of life is most likely a record of those who are saved. So some people say everybody starts in the book of life and then you're erased if you don't accept Christ. I mean, I'm not going to fight it with anybody over that. I think you're placed in the book of life when you become a believer. But again, they have arguments, and the bottom line is, if you're here, you're not in the book of life, because that judgment seat of Christ, the judgment of the nations have already happened. We've talked about that, right? Judgment seat of Christ during the tribulation, the judgment seat of nations at the end of the tribulation on to who goes into the millennium. Okay, so this is a judgment for the unsaved. It's God's like QC, quality control. In your former life, Pastor Caleb, didn't you work in a bank as kind of an inspection?
I read federal regulations and then translated them to plain English to make sure that the bank was following federal regulations.
Wow. Literally not one word of that would I want to do. Literally not one word. Not the, not the and, not the a. There is literally not one word. He loved you, Ray, because no man would do that if he didn't truly love his wife. I mean, there's nobody that would do that. So basically, he was a quality control guy, right? See how I said it in like 2 words, you know?
They call it
Compliance, yes. It's what my wife has been trying to get from me for a long time now. So it's what every 2-year-old Sunday school teacher is working really hard at. Okay, so this is God's quality control so that every mouth will be stopped and the whole world will become guilty before God. So, verse 13. I got to find it in my notes or my book or my Bible. The sea gave up the dead which were in it. So, in other words, John is going to say, you think you can escape this? Every shipwreck. Oh, there are fish food at the bottom of the ocean. No, the sea gave up the dead which were in them. And notice, and death and hell. It doesn't say the lake of fire. The false prophet is in the lake of fire. The Antichrist is in the lake of fire. And Satan is in the lake of fire. Remember, at the end of the short season, Satan is sent to the lake of fire. It doesn't say lake of fire. Hell is temporary. Lake of fire is permanent. Hell is temporary. Lake of fire is permanent. Okay? So death and hell. So what John is basically saying is you aren't going to escape. Wherever you think you can run from this judgment, if you don't place your faith in Jesus Christ, and remember, John is the same one just a couple years before that wrote the book of John. These things are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. John 20:31, right? This is the same author writing about 4 or 5 years later, maybe 6 or 7. So he's already written the book that you might believe. He's already written that book. And now he's saying, if you don't believe, this is where you're going. You aren't going to escape. You aren't going to escape. You can drown in the Marianas Trench, which is 500 miles west of Guam, about 1,000 miles east of the Philippines. And the Marianas Trench is so deep that you can drop Mount Everest, 29,000-foot mountain, into the Marianas Trench and still have a mile of water overhead. So we in Colorado are really proud about our 14,500-ish foot mountains. Everest, you stack Pikes Peak on top of, I don't know, pick your 14,000er in Colorado, and you still have another 1,000 or so feet to go. And the Marianas Trench, you can drop Pikes Peak on top of another 14,000 and pick up Denver at 5,000, and you still have plenty of room on top. Or you have room on, maybe 14, no. No, you don't. You have to put Phoenix on top of that, and that you'd have about the same. Bottom line is, you can be at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, and God's going to bring you back. You can be in hell, and God's going to bring you back. Death is not going to keep you from this judgment. Death and hell were delivered. And he says, and the sea gave up the dead, death and hell gave up the dead, which were in them into the verse 13, and they were judged, each man according to his work. So let's look at my notes. Every place a wicked person could have died will now come to face God. At the time of their death, they went to a place of conscious, let me get it right, punishment, described in the Old Testament as Sheol, and the New Testament as Hades. So when Korah, Dathan, and Abiram rebelled against Moses' leadership, and they said, oh, anybody can talk, who do you think you are to be the leader? Who do you think you are? God hates insubordination in his congregation. The consequences for insubordination in a congregation are horrific. What does Moses say to Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and the men that are standing around him? We want to lead. We want to be the boss. We want to exert influence. We're smarter than you, Moses. Moses said, don't let any normal death happen. May the ground open up, and may they go alive into Sheol. The ground opened up, and they went alive into Sheol, this place of punishment that we would call in the New Testament hell. So, death and Hades are this is I'm in my notes. Let me go back there. So these are temporary places of punishment until the judgment recorded in this passage. So anybody in this era who has not accepted Christ right now is in hell, experiencing conscious punishment. And it will never stop. We can look in the text of Scripture and we can see that there's 5 senses. We know that we have 5 senses, right? There's a punishment for taste, no water, reminding me to take a drink, right? There is for touch, there's flame. Anybody ever burnt yourself on a pan? Anybody ever burnt yourself someplace? Is that not the most painful thing? Yep. For your ears, the screams of the damned. Have you ever heard anybody screaming in absolute agony? If you're in the medical profession, you probably have. Emotional agony. Now multiply that by billions upon billions of people. Go ahead, Lorna.
Sight nursing.
Sight nursing.
Psych
Oh, psychology nursing, yes.
Psychology nursing.
Mhm.
I still remember this one dear woman. She trusted me enough. I was in a padded room with her.
Yep.
And she looked at me with tortured eyes, and she screamed, and she says, I don't want to go to hell. And I still have memories of that Monday. Just crazy out of her head, and I had nothing I could give her.
I know. So let me just say this. It's one reason.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Do you hear the dogs? Oh, the dogs. I mean, that tortured woman, it broke my heart.
So, this is why a good shepherd of a flock is always pointing the sheep to their primary mission. This is why our current Secretary of War has pointed us away from diversity, equity, and inclusion and woke back to, in the Air Force terminology, fly, fight, win. Because the only point of the United States military is to be the sword and the shield of the Republic. It's not to be a Marxist ideological experimental lab and all the members are petri dishes because we have to obey orders. Okay? What you have going on in our military right now is leadership pointing us back to our true mission, making chaplains great again. Yay. Okay, so a good shepherd is constantly pointing his sheep to winning souls, discipleship, planting and building churches. Because eternally, that's all that matters. Not petty little line. I thought the chairs in here should have been red. We should have red chairs. We should have this. We should have that. And the person making those comments, I will almost guarantee you, has never won anybody to Christ or rarely even tries. Because you're critical of people who do God's work when you're not doing God's work.
Amen.
So I just say that doesn't mean, oh my goodness, I try, but I pass out a tract. Man, come on Wednesday night and listen to Heidi talk about how she just got an opportunity to pass out a tract and the conversation. Come and listen to Marilyn talk the last few weeks about every week she's passing a tract out and getting an opportunity to win someone to Christ. Talk to Matt and Caleb at their Bible study out at Buckley, and Caleb started that Bible study, and Matt brings one of his friends, and his friends get saved. That's eternally important. Satan wants us to be distracted by things that have no eternal significance whatsoever. Be very careful. If Satan can't have your soul, he will distract you from what's most important. Keeping people from this lake of fire is most important. So he goes on and he says, the sea gave up the dead which were in them. Oh, let me go back to my notes. The lake of fire, middle of verse 13 in my notes, is what is referred to as Gehenna in Matthew 5:22, 5:29 to 30, and 10:28, and many other passages. So Gehenna was the place in the southern side of Jerusalem where they burnt their trash. In the Old Testament, they burnt their children there. When you hear the prophets say you made them walk through the fire, they had idols to Molech, and it was where they burnt their trash. And Molech had his arms out like this and a wide open mouth and a continual burning inside. And the Jews, when they were rebelling against God, when you read in the Old Testament, them being judged for making your children walk through the fire, this is what they were doing. They would lay their children in the arms of Molech, and a priest would pull on the cord, arms would go up, and the child would roll into the fire. And that's how they showed remember the firstborn in the Jewish was redeemed by a lamb or a turtle dove. Jesus was redeemed by a turtle dove because they were so poor. Molech, God said, I want you to remember that I spared your firstborn in Egypt, so you redeem a firstborn, which will be a symbol of my son, who is going to come as the redemption. But I don't require you to murder your own children. Molech required the murdering of children to show how true and faithful and how much we love Molech. Gehenna was where they burnt their children and they burnt trash. You can go to the Valley of Hinnom today, Gehenna. It's there in Jerusalem. Whenever I take trips, we drive our bus to the Valley of Gehenna, and I say, you are driving through where the Jews burnt all their kids. And this valley is the symbol of hell because the fire never went out because it was always a burning. In other words, you never let the fire go out, right? You don't let your fire go out because then you have to restart the fire. So they never let the fire go out. It's another emblem, metaphor for eternal punishment. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm explaining this. It's eternal punishment. The lake of fire is what is referred to as Gehenna, Matthew 5:22, 29:30, 20, and many other passages. Gehenna was the place of refuse and constant burning in the valley outside of Jerusalem. The unsaved bodies and spirits will appear before God. Now verse 14. Then death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. So, not to belabor a point, but Hitler one day will have a one-on-one with God. As will Stalin, as will Mao, as will your neighbor who hasn't accepted Christ. The good neighbor, like my neighbors, are great. They're great. They are the kindest people. And we've had very honest discussions about eternity and Christ. And they're just too good to be separate. They don't believe in God, but they're just too good to suffer for sin. Because they are really nice. I couldn't ask for nicer neighbors. How motivated are we and how much do we love our neighbors to do our best in kindness and love to keep them from this place? For the ears, it's screaming. As Lorna was talking about screaming, I'll never forget my first death notification. I was just a first lieutenant, and wing commander called me up and he said, or I got a text, not a text, I got a beeper. I live in the era of beepers. 911, come to the command post. Went to the command post. I was the on-call chaplain. Bring your blue uniform. That means a death notification. We drove up in the mountains in California and knocked on a home of people that I thought were old. They were probably 55. I was 28, so they looked old to me. And I can still hear them right now screaming. Your 21-year-old only son just shot himself in the head. I'm so sorry. About 3 months later, I got another beep, middle of the night, 3 o'clock, my beep went off. I was the on-call chaplain. Get your blues. We pulled out of the command post at 5:30 just as the sun was rising over the Sierras. Drive down to Marysville. One of our pilots, had two little daughters, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And we knocked on the door probably at 6:30 in the morning. The sun was just coming up. They were getting ready to go to school. It was early September. And 2 little girls came to the door. And when we stood there, the little girl, the 5-year-old, I found out later she was 5. 5-year-old screamed back at mom, "Hey, mom, there's 3 men in blue uniforms." I can still hear the scream right now. Her husband was a U-2 driver, and a horrible storm off of North Korea, and his plane had crashed, falling from 80,000 feet, broke apart. They found him in his life raft, in his spacesuit, 5 days later, bleeding out from his ears and his nose and his mouth because of bailing out at 80,000 feet. I couldn't imagine, as I reflect, that was almost 40 years ago. And I can still hear them screaming. I can't imagine being in hell. Eyes, it's pitch black. Every sense has a horror to it. Every sense has a horror to it. Verse 14, this is the final in my notes, an eternal destination of the wicked. Many believers today wish to abstain from eternal punishment, but scripturally that is truly impossible. You see it every 30 or 40 years, 25 years, a significant person will come out. How could a loving God do this? But a loving God isn't doing this. Man is doing this. That's like saying, when I got spanked as a 7-year-old by my mom for doing mischief and a lady down the street reported me, how could a loving lady, 2 loving women that gave birth to children, do that evil thing to a little sweet 7-year-old? Because I wasn't a little sweet 7-year-old. Wickedness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. Amy, you raised your hand and I kept talking. Do you remember what you wanted to ask or what you wanted to comment on?
There's as much that is given to hell and what happens to us after we die in the Bible. There's really popular belief running around right now about annihilation.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about through all of here.
Justify. It's just because they don't want to.
Well, how could a loving God do that? It really comes down to how, if God is love, they don't start with God as holy, they start with God as love, and then they twist the definition of love. So let me give you an example. So my son's a pilot, right? When very few churches today could handle Jeremiah. Most of you could not handle Jeremiah. Very few churches today could handle Isaiah. You're all going to eat your own children. But Isaiah, we go to the temple we offer our sacrifices, and Isaiah says, God doesn't want your sacrifices. Listen to my sermon this morning. Most of you could never handle Samuel. Listen to my sermon this morning. But I obeyed the word of the Lord. And Samuel says to him literally, shut up. Now our children aren't in here, right? Because if my littles were in here, my wife would say, do you not use that word? I go, well, Samuel used it. Stop lying to yourself and to us. So they redefine love as feminine nurturing. That's what DEI is. It's feminine nurturing. Now, if you're a woman, I'm not picking on you. My wife is very nurturing, and my kids need her to nurture them, or else I would have killed them. So, I mean, that's why God puts us together, right? I mean, 100%. We balance each other. But love is not feminine nurturing exclusively. Love is what Elijah did to Ahab. And Ahab looks at Elijah and said, are you the man that troubles Israel? And Elijah says, no, it's your sin. I'm not the man that... Not very many Baptist churches could handle Elijah today. Because he's so mean. No, we've lost the sense of straightforward masculine rebuke for sin. That doesn't mean that it's done in a harsh manner, but it's done in a direct manner. So let me talk about my son. So my son is an instructor pilot for beginning pilots as well as his airframe. So being an instructor pilot means you are a nasty human being. I mean, you truly are. One of the hardest things for an instructor pilot is to come home to little children. Because if you go out in a plane with an instructor pilot for an hour, literally every second is critiqued. They bring you back to the shop and they will rip you stem to stern for 2.5 to 3 hours. They will rip the hair off of you. Why do you think they do that? Annette and then Kat. Go ahead, Annette. 100%. Don't we wish the instructor pilot on that helicopter in DC who had been in the Biden White House and was only there because she was a lesbian and she was incompetent? And don't we wish that the CW03 that was in the left seat that was telling her what to do and she wasn't doing it would have taken over controls of the helicopter, because about 100 people would still be alive today? I think you can make a very strong case that CW03, that's Chief Warrant Officer 3, didn't do it because he knew she was a DEI hire, and he was afraid if he did anything that took the helicopter back. He's instructing her what to do, and she's refusing to do it, and she kills whole families. Our ice skaters at the Olympics, which one of the guys that won a gold medal or one of the medals, his parents were killed on that plane. And the only reason he wasn't on the plane because he had stayed behind. So the answer is yes. The answer is they are, it's life and death. And not just for this pilot, it could be life and death. If this guy becomes a C-17 pilot, he could have 400 Marines on that plane. They tear the face off these 21 and 22-year-old kids to make them think, okay, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that. I mean, it's brutal. I'm not talking about being harsh, but how much less when we're fighting Satan for the souls of men? Are you tracking with me? I'm not talking about being harsh, but I'm talking about being direct. People burn in this place I'm talking about for eternity, and they never get out, and they will scream for trillions of years. And we're more concerned about the color of our carpet or the color of our pew than we are about that. God forgive me, and God forgive all of us. Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and even that word harsh, when you're talking about harsh, that has been redefined too.
Oh, 100%.
Because if you're just being, I've heard different people say that John the Baptist.
Oh yeah.
He should have been more careful how he talked.
I know.
Jesus, the creator of the universe, said this was the greatest man that was ever born. But we know better. We know he.
Well, if we want to talk about that, talk about Jesus. Some of the harshest denunciations ever to exit the tongue of a human was Jesus talking to the Pharisees. You brood of vipers. You look good on the outside, but on the inside, you're dead, full of dead men's bones. Why? Because the publicans and sinners were getting saved, and they were attributing because he didn't do the process right? He healed on the Sabbath. Ah! His disciples took grain on the Sabbath. Ah! But publicans and sinners were coming to Christ. Whores were coming to Christ. And they were criticizing the process by which he did ministry rather than throwing themselves at his feet and saying, souls are saved, healings are being done, the kingdom is here. The very definition of a Pharisee is one that doesn't rejoice when people are coming to Christ, but is angry because the process in their mind hasn't been done right. That's a Pharisee. It's all over the New Testament, right? That's a Pharisee. Kat, go ahead.
I have a question about people that are in hell.
Yes.
To the judgment.
That sounded like they get to come. That sounds like, I know, I'm joking with you. I'm joking, Kat.
It is a privilege, but
Yeah.
can we still, if people we know that have passed that were not saved or profess that they didn't believe,
Yep.
can we still pray for them that they have
No.
eternity? They're done. It's just up to them.
It would be like Noah. It would be like Noah praying for the people that were banging on his door after God shut the door.
It's just
Death is when God shuts the door. Yeah, Annette, and then Chris.
Isn't blame like one of the original sins?
Blame, yeah, narrative.
Every time something goes awry, or wants to go awry, they start to blame, well, why is God?
Narrative crafting to excuse our violation of the great commandments is endemic to all humans. I don't know if you understood every word that I said, but it's endemic. I mean, it's for all of us. When my wife wants me to do something and I would rather watch TV because there's a football game on, what is she even asking me to do something in the middle of? I can come up with 50 narratives why I shouldn't. I don't. Now I'm exaggerating here, right? But I can come up with a narrative why. Yes, it's a commercial, but the commercial's over in 30 seconds, and the next play they're on the goal line. What? Okay, I can craft a narrative. Now I probably would say in that scenario, sweetheart, do you wait? Can I carry the trash out in 5 minutes? And she would go, oh, of course, sweetheart. You know what I mean? So don't get bogged down in the weeds. But I can always come up with a narrative to self-justify. James says mercy is better than judgment. And I can always come up with a narrative that I self-justify my failure to love God and love my neighbor as myself. And the greatest love for God and the greatest love for my neighbor is to understand the holiness of God has been redeemed through the blood of his son, and I need to share that. My purpose is the Great Commission. And I can craft narratives when I'm not doing Great Commission work why I'm better than somebody who is. I can craft sinful narratives about that over and over and over and over again. My dad used to always say, I like the way I win them better than the way you don't. and that he wasn't being mean by that. But he would always say, I just find almost everybody that criticizes my ministry doesn't win people to Christ or even try themselves. I'm out here at least trying. Verse 15. So this is the second death, and anyone not found written in the book of life was cast in the lake of fire. Number of my notes, if you are not in the book of life, you are thrown into eternal damnation. This verse explains the second death. It happens after the great white throne judgment, and it is eternal. Chris, I saw your hand. I saw a couple other hands. I don't want to ignore you. Go ahead.
A little off topic, but speaking of Gehenna and child sacrifices, it brings back to the Old Testament. I think it's in Kings. When Solomon prayed God for wisdom.
Yes.
Well, after he's granted wisdom, how can he still continue to bring burnt offerings?
So Solomon brought burnt offerings to the temple in obedience to God. So the burnt offerings were lambs, turtle doves, bulls, goats. Those were legitimate. What's interesting is this. When you go to Jerusalem, you'll see it. David's and Solomon's city sits here. It's about 15, 16, 17 acres. Gehenna is here, and the temple is here. So to disobey God, they had to go instead of going north to the temple, 400 yards, 500 yards, 700 yards, whatever it is, and presenting a lamb to redeem their child and keep it. Or if they were poor, like Mary and Joseph, a turtle dove that they could find along the road and catch it. I mean, anybody can get a turtle dove. And walking 600, 700 yards uphill, going up to the temple, they would redeem their child and keep it. Instead, they would leave Jerusalem and go south to the valley of Gehenna about 600 yards and kill their child as a means of redeeming their child to their God. That's how blinding Satan is. The natural impulse is to keep your child, to protect your child. I mean, who doesn't? So how blinding Satan was to them. And it reminds us, don't be blind to Satan's deceptions in your life. He's always at work to deceive you. That's why the word of God is so important.
So even though Solomon was granted wisdom, he was still deceived?
No, okay, deceived about what? Solomon didn't sacrifice his children in the fire. He took them up to the temple and offered a lamb to redeem them, and he kept them. Solomon, now, at the end of his life, Solomon made poor choices in marriages, and he built a temple to his Egyptian god across the Kidron Valley. You can stand in Solomon's palace today, or the ruins of it, and you can look across the valley and you can see exactly where he built the palace and the temple for Pharaoh's daughter to worship Ra, the sun god of Egypt. So he made some really bad choices. And God judged him for that by saying the kingdom is going to be torn in half, but I'll keep Judah because I made that promise, but your son is not going to rule over the whole kingdom. And that happened. Jeroboam and Rehoboam split the kingdom. Okay? But Solomon never sacrificed his children.
Are you equating wisdom with salvation?
Oh, that's a good question.
He was granted wisdom by God. Why did he feel that he still needed to bring burnt offerings?
Yeah, wisdom. You don't equate wisdom with forgiveness of sins. It's just looking at life through God's perspective. But so because he had wisdom, he still had sin.
And the reason he offered burnt offerings because that was the wisdom thing to do, because it was a command of God. It was a type of Christ dying on that same mountain ridge. So the temple is on Mount Moriah, and if you follow that line ridge, that's also where Christ died. He died on Mount Moriah. Annette, did you have one other thought? And I know we're late. No? Okay. Hey, listen, great comment. We get to heaven next week. Yay! By God's grace, none of you are going to be verse 15. You're going to be verses 1 to 8 of Revelation 21, the best 2 chapters in all the Bible, because it says we win. Amen. We win.